Okay, looks like the participants have slowed down, so we will go ahead and get started. First off, good morning and welcome to October's revolving topic training. So today we are covering reporting and supporting documentation. My name is Caitlin Justice, and I am a technical support manager within the Office of Accountability at DCEO. This presentation will be recorded and we will be sending it out electronically after the presentation. So if you have come in late or you need to leave early, don't worry, we'll be sending that out. So you'll have a copy of the recording and slides for you. We are monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions that come up, feel free to post them in the chat. Amber from my office will also be posting some of the resource links into the chat that we mentioned. There's not a lot of resource links today, but she will be posting those in there for you if you'd like to bookmark those. So we're also going to have some time at the end of the presentation if any questions do come up. So with that being said, we will go ahead and get started. So in today's presentation, we're going to cover the purpose of reporting and how it plays a vital role in the grant lifecycle. We're going to break down the types of reports that grantees are responsible for, including the how, when, and where to submit those reports. We're also going to explain supporting documentation that's needed to accompany your reports. And then we'll wrap up by sharing some tips and best practices for reporting and where to find some helpful resources for you. So on this slide, you can see the steps of the grant lifecycle for a competitive grant. After the execution of your grant agreement, you're going to move to the reporting stage of the life cycle. So in this stage, the grantee is to comply with the requirements that are established in your grant agreement, which include but not limited to the completion and submission of periodic performance reports, which we also call PPRs, and periodic financial reports or PFRs. So we're going to explain both of those reports in further detail in the coming slides. So why does DCEO require grant reporting? So grant reporting helps DCEO measure and monitor the achievement of grant goals. So grant goals are established between the grantor, which would be DCEO, and the grantee, which would be your entity. So all grant awards are subject to periodic reporting unless exempt or an exemption is approved by the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit at the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and also has to be documented in the Catalog of State Financial Assistance and in the Uniform Grant Agreement. So reporting allows DCEO to assess potential risks. We measure progress of the grant funded project and determine the grantee's level of compliance. So periodic reporting can help assure the grantor that grantees are providing accurate documentation of the grant expenditures, grant money is being spent as allocated, and those grant requirements are being met. The frequency of reporting is determined by an entity's compliance, financial history, or by program requirement. So your reporting dates are listed in the executed grant agreement. So please be sure to mark your reporting periods and deadlines to avoid any non-compliance issues. And those reporting requirements help to provide additional layers of assurance and control over grant programs and helps us to identify any issues and proactively seek solutions to ensure grantee success. So what does the grant reporting process entail? So grant reporting is used by all state agencies to collect performance and financial information from recipients of state grant awards. Illinois has adopted the Code of Federal Regulations, referred to as the 2 CFR Part 200, and reporting requirements can be found at the link on the slide and in the chat. So all grantees complete grant reports during the administration phase of the grant. The uniform reporting templates include the periodic performance report, which is that PPR, and the periodic financial report, or the PFR. So both reports are used in conjunction with each other to ensure performance or deliverables align with the reported financial expenditures. Additionally, some grant programs may require a ledger to be completed and submitted in addition to the PPR and PFR. And then with both of those reports, grantees must also submit supporting documentation for grant expenditures that are described in the PFR and PPR reports. So later in the presentation, I'm going to describe what appropriate supporting documentation looks like. So first up, the first report we're going to cover in detail is the periodic financial report, or the PFR. So the periodic financial report measures a grantee's financial expenditures and how those expenditures relate to the overall goals and objectives outlined in the signed grant agreement. So whenever you receive your template, the first 4 pages of the template are very detailed instructions on how to complete the reporting process. So very imperative to read through and thoroughly understand how to complete the reporting template. So on this slide, I just took a screenshot of what our blank PFR looks like so you can get a visual of that. And then I'm going to go through in detail how to complete. So pages 2 through 4 defines how to fill in the template for submission. So each line of the instructions correlates to a field within that PFR template. So in this example on the slide, the instructions will tell you what to input in the box for section A, which is grantee name, which would be the name of your entity as exactly stated in your uniform grant agreement. So if the grant agreement says it's Alpha Beta Company and you put AB Company, just make sure that you are putting exactly as your legal name says in the uniform grant agreement. So in the PFR template section A, you're going to fill in section A with your entity name, exactly how it states. In some instances, some grant programs do pre-fill this information for you. So just be cognizant of that if your grant manager is filling that information for you. If not, then you will have to complete that information. So on this slide, the top screenshot is screen grab from the instructions where you can see what the data element is, which would be grantee name, and then the definition of what that would be. And then as it correlates to the other screenshot, which is the actual PFR template, this is where you're going to put your entity's name. So as you move through the PFR template, be sure to use the correct reporting periods as stated in your grant agreement. So on the template, you'll also see a box to check if there were no changes from your prior reporting period and or no new expenses for this reporting period. So on this slide, I've highlighted the box that says report period. So you're going to enter those dates in there. And then if there were any changes, if there were no changes from a prior report that you've submitted, then you would check the box, the other box that's highlighted. So this section of the PFR corresponds to the approved budget expenditures and approved amounts for your grant award. So you can see in column X, you're going to add each budget expenditure category and the approved budget amount in column Y. So you can click on the add button, which is on the far right column, to add more lines in the PDF if their categories and amounts have not been pre-filled by your grant manager. So some grant programs do go in and they plug in all of your information to begin with, but some programs don't. So just want to explain both ways. Section Z, which is that middle portion of the report, you're going to complete the current period grant expense, your prior approved grant expenses, and your grant expense adjustment. So the post adjustment grant expenses is auto calculated based on the sum of the current grant expenses and the prior approved grant expenses and adjustments. So that post adjustment column will be auto calculated. So once you've entered all the reporting information, the authorized signatory or authorized designee will need to sign and date the report to be submitted to your grant manager. So sometimes the need arises to make some changes or additions to the authorized signatory or designee. So you do have that option. And to get those steps to make a change, you just need to work with your grant manager. For some instances, maybe there was a change in like your mayor or an election was held and you need to change who that signatory is. So just be sure to have open dialogue with your grant manager to get that changed. I also want to point out that any deviation from, excuse me, from the instructions can result in delays for approval of your reports. So with that being said, just want to make sure you're thoroughly reading and understanding the components of the financial report, excuse me, and what to include. So we don't want you to deviate from that and just include what they are asking for. So. And of course, if you have any questions as you're filling out the reports, your first line of contact will always be your grant manager. So just be sure that you have an open dialogue with them and you can address any questions or anything like that. They're your first line of questioning. And then you can always reach out to the help desk if you have any additional questions. So this slide is a screenshot of an approved PFR report. I blocked out the top, so there's no identifying information, but this grantee has completed the PFR template, and this is what it looks like on your page. So as you can see, they have their category and expenditures. Their columns were created, their approved budget amounts were entered, and then you can see as you go across the columns, like I mentioned in the previous slide, that everything has been completed or auto-calculated. This is the second page of the report. I couldn't fit it all on one slide, so which would be their totals. So this is just your running totals as across the bottom for their direct expenses and total expenditures. And then that wraps up the PFR. So now we're going to transition over to the PPR, which is that periodic performance report. So this is the second template that you'll also be responsible for completing. So the periodic performance report is used to collect performance information from recipients of state grant awards. So your deliverables can look different depending on your grant award. So just as an example, deliverables can include conducting a workshop, purchasing equipment, or hiring contractors, just to throw a couple examples out there. The deliverables that are specific to your grant can be found in the grant agreement in Exhibit A. So like the PFR, you're also going to see that the periodic performance report begins with a set of instructions for completing the reporting template. It also includes definitions for each section of the report. So please just remember to complete each section if not already pre-filled by your grant manager. So when you're completing sections 14 through 22 of the performance template, you can also provide it in a separate format. So you're going to need to include the file name and the database source if you're using a separate format. So just be sure to communicate that with your grant manager and include that in that box for sections 14 through 22. So after the data has been entered for the periodic performance reporting template, it also needs to be signed by your authorized signatory or designee prior to submission. So like I did for the PFR, here is a completed PPR. I've blocked out some information, so you can't see that on the top, but it has been completed. Just wanted to show you an example of what a completed PPR will look like. So these next couple slides will show that. This is the second page. And finally, the third page in certification. So that is an example of a completed PPR report. So I mentioned ledger earlier. So if required by the grant program, grantees will also need to prepare and submit a ledger with their reporting templates and supporting documentation. So what this ledger is basically an expense tracker that demonstrates amounts spent per expenditure category. So it can come in an Excel format and it accompanies your PFR, which is the financial report. So in the ledger, grantees are reporting on expenses that they are seeking reimbursement for. So there's no need to include any expenses that are paid from outside sources. So I have two examples on this slide. You can see the one on the left has the capital program, and then the right has the personnel, fringe, travel. So two different types, just depending on your grant program and how those expenditure categories will be included. And if required by your grant program, they will send a completed ledger for you, and then you'll just be responsible for inputting the amounts. So just wanted to point that out there. So within the Ledger workbook, there are sheets that auto-populate to that grant summary. So the grant summary is going to be that tab number 1. So within the workbook, they have separate budget expenditures. So if you have an invoice for design and engineering, you're going to enter that information in the 1205 design and engineering worksheet, and the amount that was charged to that grant column will auto-populate to that grant summary, which is located on the first page. So the top of the screen grab that I got on the slide, I entered in, I had an invoice and it was for $5,000 from sample vendor, and it was for architectural drawings for a new cultural center. So since I input that inside of the workbook, it automatically takes that and populates to that first page of the ledger. So I can see that my approved budget that I had $5,000 to spend on design and engineering, and reporting that I received the invoice for that and paid it, and that's where my amount will go in. So you can see as you go through the expenditures and complete this, maybe in one of the reporting periods that you have a little bit of wiring and electrical expenses, but you haven't met all of your approved budget line for that. So it will be a continual input of that information into the ledger. So it's cumulative, not separate. So, and like I said earlier, you will submit the ledger if required by your program along with your PFR report. So I know I've mentioned the reporting schedule a few times, but what exactly is it? So your reporting schedule is located in your executed grant agreement, and that report deliverable schedule explains all the different reports that's due for a grant award. So you can find it in Article 36. There's going to be information on the external audit report, annual financial reports, the required periodic reports, and a section on any changes to a reporting schedule. So a grantee's required periodic reporting schedule is included in this section, and you can see on this slide how the schedule is portrayed in the grant agreement. So for this example, it is a quarterly reporting schedule. So you can see, like I've highlighted with arrows, the month and year that the report is for. And as you go through, it says quarterly financial report, quarterly performance report, the date in parentheses. So for this example was May 2nd of 2022. That is your due date. And the reporting period that you're going to be including your expenses for would be January 1st, 2022 through March 31st of 2022. And then you're also going to see who you need to send it to, which would be your grant manager. So those are to be submitted electronically to your grant manager. This is what an actual reporting schedule looks like. So just wanted to point that out, and you can see the dates are bolded, and you can see when the actual due dates are. So very imperative that you are marking down those due dates so you are in compliance and submitting those on time. So along with those reporting templates, your grantee will also need to include proper supporting documentation. So supporting documentation allows grant managers to confirm and authenticate the information provided is accurate and directly related to the grant expenditures. So supporting documentation helps grant managers to confirm accuracy of reports. We can identify any performance issues, which can then help with the implementation of any corrective actions if needed. So when you begin expending your funds for a grant project, just make sure that you're maintaining that documentation of the entire project from start to completion. So that way we can accurately reflect what you are reporting in your PFR and PPR. So supporting documentation, it's also important for grant monitoring and for record retention. So for periodic financial reporting, grant managers will review grant expenditures to verify if documents adequately support the expenses. So your grant manager is going to review the source of the supporting documents. So do the documents include evidence from outside parties? And I'll go into that a little bit in more detail. For periodic performance reporting, your grant manager is going to review your documents to verify that you performed in accordance with the performance standards that are set forth in your grant agreement. So I'm going to give you some examples of supporting documentation for the verification of deliverables. So this could be copies of flyers, ads, or posts, event dates and descriptions, list of participants, a number of attendees, attendee sign in, photographs of your capital project or renovation project. And then you can also consider any other documentation that would support your satisfaction of the requirements. So when you're submitting your supporting documentation, it's also important to include your entity name, grant number, and your reporting period dates on that, just to make sure that the document doesn't get lost and we can file it correctly, just to make sure we're keeping it all in order. So just wanted to make that little tip as well. So I mentioned documentation sources, so I'm going to get a little bit more detailed on that. So when you're gathering your supporting documents, just be aware of where the supporting documentation is coming from. So an internally sourced document originates within the company. So that would be an example, would be your employee timesheets. So another example would be an internally sourced document that originates outside of the company. So that would be an example would be a bank statement for proof of payment. So this type of source document is ideal documentation for our processes. And then we also have an externally sourced document that originates outside of the company. So an example of that would be an itemized invoice, which this type of document is the best possible document one can obtain, but DCEO will not contact third parties to obtain the documentation. It's up to you as the grantee to obtain that documentation. So just wanted to point that out on the different documentation sources as you are getting your supporting documentation ready. Also important to have an open dialogue with your grant manager on your supporting documentation. So the type of supporting documents can depend on what the grant is, the scope of work, and your environment as the grantee. So remember that supporting documentation is needed for proof of service and proof of payment. So then your grant manager will need to verify that the work has been completed and what you're saying has been accomplished. So I do have some items listed on this slide that will help guide you as the grantee on what should be considered vital information in your supporting documents. So is there a date on the document? Do you have the service date on the document? Is it an itemized invoice? Are there specific accounts, amounts, addresses? Also wanted to point out the two in bold. So late fees and cancellation fees are not reimbursable. So sometimes those get submitted. So I just wanted to get that out there that we do not reimburse for late fees or cancellation fees. So wanted to add that on there. Now I'm going to show you some examples of acceptable documents based on your grant awards expenditure categories. So if construction was one of your expenditure categories, some supporting documentation can include signed and dated contracts, lien waivers from contractors and subcontractors, proof of payment, bank statements, canceled checks, credit card statements, and quotes or bids depending on the total amount of the contract. If you have purchased items or services, supporting documentation can include deeds if you're purchasing land, title or deed if a building is purchased, contract for the purchase, loan documents from the bank if applicable. Any other purchases aside from land or building can include itemized bills and invoices, proof of delivery or service completion, quotes or bids depending on the total amount of the contract, proof of payment, bank statements, canceled checks, and or credit card statements. So for payroll, signed timesheets or system produced and approved timesheets. So you're going to need to take into consideration with this one the holiday, vacation, and sick time if the employee did not spend 100% of their work on the grant project. So that time must be allocated proportionally. So, a canceled check, bank statement, or verification that the employee is on direct deposit, which a payroll system screenshot could suffice. You would include hours worked and hourly rate employees were paid to reimburse. Well, let me say that again. So you're going to include hours worked and the hourly rate employees were paid to reimburse the rate allowed by the grant or the actual pay rate, whichever is less. So just remember that reimbursement must be based on the rate that the employee was paid at the time of the work was completed, not the rate the employee is paid currently. So any fringe documentation can include insurance invoices or an employer's quarterly tax return. Typically, that's Form 941. So if you are looking for that. So now we've seen the reporting templates and the reporting schedule, but what happens if you were to miss your due date and become non-compliant with your reports? So we have the Grantee Compliance Enforcement System, which is a framework that helps state agencies manage occurrences of non-compliance with grant requirements. So if a grantee were to become non-compliant with grant reporting, these are the steps that would occur. So first and foremost, as a little warning bell, the grantee contact will receive a notification 7 days prior to the reporting due date. So if that report is not submitted by the due date, a notification is then sent 1 day past due date. If it has been 15 days past the reporting deadline, another letter is generated called the cash shutoff letter, and the grantee is then FEEN locked. So when in FEEN lock, no funds will be dispersed from the locking agency and no modifications can be made to any current grant agreements. So if the report is still not submitted 15 days from the date of the cash shutoff letter, then the grantee is placed on the Illinois Stop Payment List and will not receive any funds from any state agency and cannot make any modifications to current grant agreements. So the grantee will stay on the Illinois Stop Payment List until those reports have been submitted and approved by the grant manager. However, if you happen to find yourself on the Illinois Stop Payment List, you can always log in to the GATA portal to see your status, and you can contact the agency that's placed you on the list, or you can contact your cognizant agency for assistance on how to get back in compliance. Sometimes that happens with somebody at your entity leaves and they were in charge of reporting, but they didn't relay that message to somebody and those dates get missed. So not to worry, just you can reach out to your cognizant agency. So if DCEO is your cognizant agency, you can reach out to us at the help desk and we can help you to get those steps, what you need to complete and what was missing, so you can get back into compliance. So that's just a brief breakdown of what happens during non-compliance. Next up on this next slide, I'm going to actually show a short video that's going to explain reporting and kind of cover what I've gone over so far.
Welcome to the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity Grantee Training. In this presentation, we will be discussing periodic reporting required of all grantees with the state of Illinois. In this training, we will outline the purpose of performance and financial reporting. We will outline how, when, and where to submit reports, as well as what documentation is required. We'll also share some best practices for reporting and where to find additional resources. There are two types of reporting necessary for compliance: the Periodic Financial Report, or PFR, and the Periodic Performance Report, or PPR. Grantees are required to comply with periodic reporting because it allows DCEO to measure and monitor the achievement of grant goals. Grant goals are established between grantor and grantee. Unless statutorily exempt or an exception is approved by the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit at the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and documented in the Catalog of State Financial Assistance and the Grant Agreement, all grant awards are subject to periodic performance reporting. Reporting gives DCEO a glimpse into the grant program to assess potential risk, measure progress, and determine the grantee's level of compliance. Reporting provides additional layers of assurance and control over grant programs and helps DCEO identify issues and proactively seek solutions to ensure grant success. Noncompliance with grant requirements can cause a disruption in grant funding and program progress. When grantees are successful, DCEO is successful. Both the PFR and PPR are standard and uniform progress reports used by all state agencies to collect performance and financial information from recipients of state grant awards. Reporting illuminates the inner workings of a grant program and assures the state that funds are being spent appropriately and that the grantee's program is on the right track. Reporting covers performance measures, or deliverables, and assesses whether these align with reported expenditures. For example, Greta's list of deliverables includes the excavation of a building site for her nonprofit. Following the excavation, Greta receives the construction company's invoice, as well as photos of the finished project. Providing financial documentation on the contractor that performed the excavation and the amount paid will reflect in the grantee's PFR, and documentation reflecting the completion of the excavation will be documented in the PPR. All items must align. The Periodic Financial Report, also known as PFR, measures the grantee's financial expenditures and how those expenditures relate to the overall goals and objectives outlined in the grant agreement. Information on the PFR can be found in Article 10 of the grant agreement. It is extremely important that grantees understand the reporting process to avoid the possibility of wasting time and resources. The first 4 pages of the PFR template include detailed instructions on how to complete the process. Page 1 outlines report submission as well as requirements. Pages 2 through 4 outline exactly how to fill in the template for submission. Each line of the instructions correlates to a field within the PFR template. Gil is completing his PFR and gets to a section he isn't sure how to complete. In this example, Gil is unsure of his mandatory match percentage. Luckily, Gil knows to refer to the designated letter of that field, in this case, R, and find that letter on the instructions page. Gil can see that the mandatory match percentage can be found in his grant agreement. Gil now understands what information to put in this section and where to find it. Now, Gil can confidently complete this section of the report. When grantees report expenditures on their PFR, they are required to account for each dollar spent in the form of a ledger. The ledger details the amount paid and the payee in addition to invoice number, date of invoice, check dates, and check amounts. The first page of the ledger outlines each cost category and amount spent as well as identifying information such as organization name, grant number and term, as well as reporting period. Those cost categories are then broken down into separate tabs at the bottom of the page. All expenditures will be accounted for in detail within these cost categories. All totals need to align with expenditures reported. Most programs will utilize the template shown here, but your grant manager will let you know about any possible deviations. If your organization has a robust accounting system and can provide your own grant ledgers that contain identical information by line item, then please let your grant manager know and you may be able to utilize the system-produced grant ledger instead of the Excel template. Grantees should maintain backup documentation in the form of invoices and proof of payments such as canceled checks and bank statements. Any quantifiable expenditures need to show cost calculations and demonstrate cost effectiveness and justification. Additionally, all backup documentation should include the dates of purchase and acquisition. Grantees submit their PFR and all required supplemental documentation to the state agency contact identified in the grant agreement found in Exhibit C under Contact Information. The deadline for the PFR will vary from grantee to grantee based on the specified frequency of their reporting. Grantees are notified of upcoming reporting due dates via auto-generated emails from eGrants. Additionally, grantees are notified if the report has not been submitted within 6 days of the deadline. A report is considered late if not submitted within 15 days of the deadline specified by the grant agreement. A final PFR shall be required at the completion of the grant term. For final PFRs, the reporting period end date shall be the end date of the project. Like the PFR, the Periodic Performance Report, or PPR, is a standard and uniform progress report used by all state agencies to collect performance information from recipients of state grant awards. Information about the PPR can be found in Article 11 of the Grant Agreement. The PPR reports on performance requirements contained within the grant agreement. This includes deliverables and milestones and performance measures and standards. Like the PFR, the PPR comes with a set of detailed instructions at the beginning of the form. The first page outlines how to submit the report as well as the required supplemental documentation. Within the instructions, there are numbers that correlate to sections within the form. In pages 2 to 4, each section is outlined with what information is required and where the grantee may find it. For example, Holly is filling out her periodic performance report and gets to section 9. Here, she is to provide the agreement period, but she isn't completely sure of how to fill in this section. Holly wants to be completely certain of the information she is providing. Holly remembers that she can refer to section 9 within the instructions of the periodic performance report. Here, she figures out where to find the information needed to complete this section. Holly can navigate between the template and the instructions as necessary to find all the relevant information needed for her report. Based on information reported in sections 14 through 22, additional documentation is required. Here, the grantee reports on deliverables outlined in the grant agreement. Examples of deliverables and milestones include conducting a workshop, purchasing equipment, providing trainings, hiring contractors. Events that have significant impact on performance should be flagged as well, such as problems, delays, or adverse conditions which will materially impair the ability to meet the objective of the grant. Favorable developments which help meet time schedules and objectives sooner or at less cost than anticipated or producing more or different beneficial results than originally planned. Deliverables do not equal performance measures, as these are entirely separate in the performance report. If deliverables were due and completed in prior reporting periods, they do not need to be repeated in the current performance report. Supporting documentation for deliverables and milestones could include sign-in sheets for job training programs, copies of promotional materials, report of services rendered, pictures of capital projects. If additional pages or documentation are needed, they should include the following information: grant number, grantee organization, UEI number, FEIN, or FEIN, and period covered by the PPR. Like the PFR, the PPR is submitted to the state agency contact identified in the grant agreement. The entire reporting package will include the completed PPR template as well as supporting documentation. The PPR is to be completed at the frequency outlined in the grant agreement and follow the prescribed deadlines. Grantees are notified of upcoming reporting due dates via auto-generated emails from eGrants. Additionally, grantees are notified if the report has not been submitted within 6 days of the deadline. The PPR is considered late if it is not submitted within 15 calendar days of the deadline specified in the grant agreement. The grant agreement addresses noncompliance to reporting requirements. Failure to comply with reporting requirements is considered a material breach of the grant agreement and can lead to the withholding of funds through an FEIN or FEIN lock, placement on the Illinois Stop Payment List, or the return of improper payments or unallowable costs. Noncompliance may even lead to legal action to recover grant funds. It is important to communicate any concerns regarding reporting issues and deadlines with your grant manager. Remember to maintain a strong line of communication with your grant manager to ensure they are aware of any issues and can provide guidance, if needed. Proactively addressing issues will help you maintain compliance and complete your reporting on schedule. Remember, grantees with DCEO will receive notice when their reporting deadline is approaching and will also be notified if they have missed their deadline. To summarize, all grants, unless specified and documented otherwise, are subject to periodic reporting requirements. Information about reporting requirements is available in the grant agreement and should be reviewed thoroughly. All reports should be submitted to the agency contact listed in the grant agreement by the specified deadline to avoid noncompliance. Remember that noncompliance can escalate and result in the pausing of grant funds, the inability to apply for grant programs or execute or modify future grant agreements, and could even lead to the return of grant funds to the funding agency. Beyond missing deadlines, inaccurate or misleading reporting is also grounds for noncompliance, as this is a deliberate misrepresentation of information. You can learn more about periodic reporting by visiting the GAT2 resource page at gatva.illinois.gov/resources. GAT2 stands for Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit, which is part of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, also known as GOMB. You may also visit the grantee resource page by scanning the QR code with your mobile device or enter the bit.ly URL into your web browser. Thank you for watching this presentation on periodic reporting. If you have any questions, please reach out to ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. Welcome.
Perfect. So if you enjoyed that type of video, we do have several other videos on our website as well. I'll plug those a little bit later, but you can find more content like that on our website. So as we wrap up, I do want to share some tips with you. Like I did say earlier, we just want to make sure that you are reading through all the instructions for the reporting templates, and as well as communicating with your grant manager. Vital to have that open line of communication between yourself and the grant manager. It's especially important to get any concerns or any issues out there as soon as you can, so that way you have the time to address those. So just want to highlight that, and just please understand too that grant managers do have several grantees that they are working through these reports too, and most of those reports can be due on the same time frame. So just keep that in mind, that your grant manager will work as diligently as possible, but they do have a lot of grants that they're handling outside of your entities as well. Another tip to share would be just to make sure that the authorized signatory or the authorized designee is signing both the PFR and the PPR. Your authorized signatory is typically that top level leadership. So it could be the mayor, your village president, your chairman of the board if it's a county. So just keep that in mind. That's who your authorized signatory is. The authorized signatory can designate an authorized designee to sign in their absence. That can be done whenever you're executing your grant agreement, or can be done with your grant manager if any changes or anything needs to take place. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Another tip to share is just make sure that your expenditure categories are consistent with your approved grant budget. So if you didn't have wiring and electrical in your approved grant budget, but you're trying to claim expenditures and reimbursement for that, just note that that's not going to happen. You just want to be consistent with what's in your approved grant budget, so you make sure you can get reimbursed for those expenses. Always have a second pair of eyes to go over your reports. So if you're working on submitting them, maybe get with a team of colleagues and go over and just make sure you're including all of the pertinent information in your reports. Big one for me, I like to use calendar reminders. So I would definitely put those due dates in your Outlook or whatever email you use, just so that you have all of the due dates on your calendars, and making sure you're working to get those reports submitted on time. It does pop up on you quickly. That's like today, it's already, halfway through October, which is crazy. So just make sure that you are appropriately getting those calendar reminders updated for you, so you're not delinquent on your reports. One of the hot issues that we get in the help desk when it comes to reporting is actually opening the reports. So I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that Adobe Acrobat is needed to open your reports. And some computer settings, it has, whenever you open an attachment or an email, it will automatically open in a browser. So we just need to make sure that that setting is disabled, and that whenever you're opening a PDF, that you select Adobe Acrobat to open. I think that's probably the number one like technical issue that we see, is whenever somebody's going to open up that report that a grant manager has sent you, it's opening in a browser. So then they either get an error message or they're not able to edit and input their information. So just make sure that you're opening them in Adobe Acrobat. If you do have any issues like that and need assistance, you can reach out to the help desk, and we can walk you through it on how to do that, but just wanted to put that out there as well. And then one of the last tips is whenever you are submitting your PPR and PFR, those templates are to be cumulative and not separate. So each month or quarter, whenever your reports are due, you're going to continue to use that same template and just making those updates, which would be like the reporting periods and things like that. So just know that those templates are to be cumulative and not separate. And then I'm going to share some of our resources with you. So as a grantee, we want you to have all of the information at your fingertips. So we want to definitely highlight what we have for you through DCEO. So our team here at DCEO has worked very hard on creating one-page resources and those videos like we just saw earlier. So if you would like to find our resource site, we call it the grantee resource site. You can use that link. It's also in the chat. Here on this site, you're going to find DCEO's current grant opportunities. So if you're interested in seeing what's out there and what you can apply for, you can find that there. You can find our video and resource library. You can also find the link for our upcoming trainings and sign up for training. So since you're here, I'm assuming most of you have already used the grant training sign up. So thank you for that. We offer revolving topic trainings, which is this type of training, on the third Wednesday of the month. And then on the first Wednesday of the month, we offer pre-qualification. So if you'd like to sign up for that. And then we also offer weekly office hours, which is every Tuesday from 2 to 3 p.m. It's virtual as well. You just hop on a WebEx, and our team is there to answer any grant related questions that you had. We had a great session yesterday, so it's very informal. There's no formal presentation or anything. It's simply current and potential grantees hopping on and asking questions. So, and if we don't have the answers for you, then we definitely reach out to our program specific departments and get those answers for you, get you in touch with the correct person. And then another resource that we utilize is our virtual grant help desk. So if you have any questions that come up, and maybe you were in office hours and you forgot to ask a question, or you're working through your application documents and you have a question, you can send that to our help desk email, and it's manned during regular business hours, and we will answer your questions or provide instructions for you, whatever needs to be done. So just want to put that out there. So we don't want you just like sitting on this question. If you're not sure what to do or the steps you need to take, feel free to send us an email, and we can work through that with you and provide those instructions for you. We're happy to do so. So those are our resources for you. And then upcoming, so I just wanted to look ahead to give you guys a preview. So for November, which crazy, I can't already, November, it's nuts to me. So November 6th, we'll have pre-qualification training. All of our trainings are virtual, and we do record them all except for office hours. So if you are on the sign up list, you will get a copy of the recording and the slides. So we have pre-qualification on November 6th, and then the revolving topic for November will be writing a grant application. It is one of our most requested trainings, so that one will be coming up in November. So definitely mark that on your calendar to attend. And then I mentioned earlier, we have our weekly office hours. So just to give you a look of what we have coming up. And then just wanted to finish up. This is our grant help desk email. So if you have any other questions, just please let us know. Otherwise, I will go back through the chat and open it up for any questions that we have. Stop sharing. And thank you to Amber for going through and monitoring the chat. Oh, looks like we do have a few. Okay, let me. And if you do have a question or you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand feature and I can find you and unmute you to ask your question. Let's see.
Well,
So
they've
is
all been
there-
answered, but if you want to go through them, you can.
Oh, okay. So Amber went through and answered all those, so appreciate that. Let's see. Wow. Okay. Well, if there's no other question, I don't see any hand raised right now, but I just wanted to put that option out there. Otherwise, we will wrap up for today. Be looking for the recording and slides to be sent later on this afternoon. And other than that, thank you so much for attending. We appreciate everybody joining us and hope to see you next month too. Thanks so much.
Hey, Caitlin,
Yep.
we have a raised hand.
Oh, I see ya. Okay, Michael, let me find you. Hey, Michael, you're unmuted.
Sorry, I didn't mean to keep you a little longer, but I went out to sam.gov and registered, and I got the UEI number, but it won't let me register unless I'm a government entity. I'm not a government entity, I'm a non-for-profit, and it tells me because I'm a non-for-profit, I don't need to register.
So there's 3 columns that show up, and we need to collect the financial assistance column because what sam.gov does is they try to tell you what you would like to register for. So there's actually an option, and I'm not sure if you went through the registering for sam.gov training, but there's a link you can click on that will expand so you're able to register. And if that doesn't work, just let me, if you want to send an email to the help desk and I can set up a WebEx with you later on today if you have time. And I can help walk you through that and share if you want to share your screen with me and we can walk through that and I can help you with that.
That'd be great. I did send this question to the help desk, so after I already have that.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. I'm on the help desk today, so I'll get in there after the training and we can get that set up for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I see another question in the chat. It says, on one of the forms, I noticed a cage number is required or requested. Can you speak about this and who is this for? So since we actually just with sam.gov, that's where when you complete your registration, you are assigned a cage number and that's where that comes from. So if you are unsure of your cage number, you do not have one yet, if you're not, I'm assuming that you're registered in sam.gov if you are an active grantee, but it's located in your sam.gov information. And you can also reach out to your grant manager to ask them if they specifically need that number to be completed. But you can find that in your sam.gov registration. You'll find your cage number. Hope that answered your question. Oh, and Amber linked the recording to the registering in sam.gov. Okay, you are registered. I've not observed that. Yeah, so if you log into your sam.gov again, you can either see that in your workspace or there's actually an option to download your entity information and your cage number will be included in that. Got another question coming up. Does DCEO have a list of grant writers that we can contact for help with applications? So we do not. We do provide some training. So like next month, we are offering our writing a grant application training. So I would definitely recommend signing up for that and attending so you can hear more about how to best complete your applications. But we do not provide any grant writers or anything like that to anybody. Amber also included a link it's one of those cartoons that, like I showed previously, applying for a grant. So definitely check that out. But I highly recommend trying to attend the training next month if your schedule allows. Okay, looks like we got about 5 minutes left. So if any other questions come up, please let us know. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. Okay, with that being said, everyone have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.